This is Stigma, where we talk with leaders from many industries about how mental health and addiction have impacted their lives. Many people suffer silently from mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma. They never seek help because of stigma. In this podcast, host Stephen Hayes and his guests share their stories of recovery in order to encourage others to do the same. Here's Stephen.
Welcome back to the Stigma Podcast. What is stopping you from starting a business? The answer is nothing. There's no excuse. Today's guest did it from prison, and she's here to talk about that. She's got a couple years of sobriety. She's got a new business that she started in prison. She's here to talk to us about second chances. Her name is Emily O'Brien, and I will link to her social media and how to get a hold of her in the show notes. But without further ado, Emily, thank you for being here.
Yes, I'm so excited. This is great. Awesome to talk to you. And here we are, Friday, TGI.
Yeah, right on, man. Happy Friday. So for our audience who doesn't know a lot about your story, can you give us a little bio background on kind of how you got to where you are?
Sure, 100%. I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, which is about an hour, southwest of Toronto. Two great parents, sisters, everything. Had a lot of energy as a kid, went to camps. High school, kind of got into some experimental things, the usual, like drugs and alcohol. But I graduated with honors. So I always had drive, but I also just had a drive to socialize as well. In my early 20s, this kind of got me into a little bit more trouble. And I started using cocaine pretty regularly. And then I went from celebrating to medicating with the substances, which caused me to think that the relationship that I was in was like good for me. And it clearly wasn't. And couple months later, I've been seeing this guy for a couple months, and we go on this trip. I find out where I'm bringing drugs back over the border with him, and I just did it. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, you were trafficked," but then part of me kind of knew that it was going to go on. So I've had a tough time really believing fully that I was trafficked. But anyway, so I get put in prison, and obviously this is not where my life trajectory.
Not on the plan, right? Like this is. There's a deviation from the honor student plan.
Yeah, I didn't put that in my application for grad school that I wanted to go to prison.
If you had they could have said you accomplished your goal, though.
I know. And then I was like, okay, I'd always been pretty entrepreneurial. And like I said, I always had a drive. I'd always had jobs. I'd always paid for my own things. And I wanted to kind of create something good out of the really bad that had happened. And if there was one thing that I had after all this, it was belief in myself and also belief that things really needed to change. And so I kind of, in prison, where I was serving this 4-year sentence, and I'm still serving it now, we were all kind of having popcorn and sharing popcorn. And I was like, wait a minute, why don't I use popcorn as sort of like the symbol to advocate for people in prison, that they're smart, that they're loving, that they're good people, and that they just need people on their side. They need support when it comes to reintegrating. So that's kind of what I did. I launched a popcorn business from prison, and I've been out for almost a year now, over a year. And yeah, we just we're starting to scale up on our popcorn distribution. So it's been small business for about a year, and I've done talks, and now here we are. And I hire everyone basically, but I really do love to hire people that have done time in prison, because I know how hard it can be.
So why popcorn? I mean, I guess I kind of want to dig into the idea creation, right? So when did you decide that you were going to make popcorn and turn it into a business? You probably got stuck making popcorn as a task or a job in prison, and you're like, holy shit, I can turn this into a thing.
Well, it was actually a really popular prison snack. And we had the list of the canteen, you can get your chips, you can get your chocolate, you can get your pop ice cream, but you could buy popcorn kernels as well. But you couldn't really buy, there was no, pre-bagged popcorn. And so what the women would do is that we'd put our own combinations of spices on it. So we'd put, the cheese from Kraft Dinner on it, or we'd put Splenda and cinnamon, or what else did we put? Lemon pepper and dill. And then I loved how creative people could be. And popcorn was a shared snack. So it represented community. It represented strength in a time of uncertainty and worry. And it represented hope. So I really wanted to kind of bring those two themes together to launch a social enterprise. And I knew that popcorn, there's lots of popcorn companies out there, sure. everyone told me, oh my God, you don't want to be in the popcorn business. But I was like, but it's not just popcorn. The most important part is that we're advocating for change, and we're advocating for people that deserve a second chance. And that's the essence of the brand. And it's all about making a comeback. And that's why I called it comeback snacks. So if you look at all the popcorn companies, you don't really what do you know smart food for? It's just like smart food. Like you kind of just know popcorn for popcorn. You don't really know it for anything other than popcorn, right? So I wanted to make comeback snacks about the mission and the growth and the strength, and then also, but shared through popcorn.
So when you're sitting in prison and you're making popcorn and you go, hey, I've got this could be a business. What are the steps you take as an aspiring entrepreneur while you're still locked up to start a business? Because I want to tell this story because there's all these entrepreneurs out there that make all these excuses about why they can or can't do certain things to start their business. And so I really love that you're setting this example that you can start a business from prison. So if you're outside of prison, you really don't have a lot of excuses.
Yeah. So in prison, you really don't have a lot of resources. And by creating kind of like a business plan. So what I did, I was like, okay, I have a phone. What can I use the phone for? I have the prison library, and I have some stamps, and I have access to certain ingredients because I was in medium security and then minimum. So in Canada, the prison system for women, we actually live in houses and we cook all of our own food. So that's why I was kind of able to access different spices and stuff like that. So I kind of thought about not so much in terms of what I didn't have, but what I did have. And so I had a library. So I was able to read articles on prison reform. I was able to get the librarian to print me out stuff on, market research. I was able to get my current business partner actually to send me in stuff in the mail, like recipe ideas and food stuff on food trends. And so because I did have a university degree and I had been pretty educated, don't get me wrong, I don't have a master's or anything like that. I don't have the MBA, but I knew how to do research. And so I was able to kind of tap into the different resources that I had inside the prison, inside my head and outside the prison to compile this amalgamation of resources to put together a scratch business plan. And this plan was by no means some 15-page business plan. This was okay, what are the costs? Who are the competitors? Where can we fit in the market? And how can we get there? And those were basically, we were able to kind of answer those 4 questions. And then I just started doing my PR. I kind of became a PR expert in prison because I wrote letters. And if you really want to get a hold of someone, writing a letter is a really good way because everyone opens letters especially from prison.
So who were you writing these letters to?
I was writing them to journalists that had written on prison reform or just written about crime or whatever in the neighborhood or in the city. I wrote letters to people that had podcasts or radio shows. I wrote letters to authors that I knew cared about prison reform or just entrepreneurship in general, because entrepreneurship is really all about risk. And you'll find that in prison, there was tons of people that just were on the wrong side, the illegal side of entrepreneurship. They were good at it, but because they broke the law, they got put in jail. But it doesn't mean they weren't running a successful business on the outside, right? So you'll find a lot of people that do end up in jail are actually in some way or form an entrepreneur because we're not afraid of risk, right? So I think that's the number one thing.
That's really fascinating to me. And so it makes me think that there's this funnel or this sort of pool of entrepreneurs that are sitting in prison that if they were educated, trained, inspired the right way while they were there, and then coached the right way and helped as they're getting out, they could be building a lot of really great businesses, and some of those businesses could help a lot of people. So maybe the prison system should be thinking about becoming an incubator in a way. I
think they should, 100%. 100%. And I kind of felt this when I went in. And then when I was actually in prison, that's another thing that I researched. I was like, who are some people that have maybe been to prison that are really successful entrepreneurs? And that's when I kind of found out about Cos Marte and Andrew Medal. I found out about, Sherry Garcia. So just by doing this kind of active research and who has been doing things, and because I knew that I couldn't be alone, right? And I knew that it wasn't just me that was realizing that, I wasn't bad and I was actually had a lot of potential. I just, I heard a lot of people doing what I did, But I knew that breaking through that stigma also was something that just had to be done in order for us to like really tap into the workforce that we need. Like if we exclude everyone from our places of work because they have a criminal record, what do you think that's doing to our workforce? Right? It's just kind of, it's a double-edged sword. It's just ridiculous. So
you said this thing that stood out to me around you realized that you weren't bad. So that has to have something to do with stigma, right? Like, so what are you sitting in prison? You're thinking about what you did and you're just like, dejected and beating yourself up and stigmatizing yourself. Like, what was that like? I mean, I guess, how long did you sit there feeling that way before you started to realize, I'm not bad and I can do something positive?
I actually realized this before I even went to prison. And so usually, like, as people normally do when they experience something significant in their life that they kind of had something to do with, like I went through a denial phase and I was like, nope, this asshole like did it to me, like fuck him. And then I surrounded myself with people that helped me embrace that identity of a victim. And that wasn't getting me anywhere. And then, also with my family was really disappointed and we got in a lot of fights and everything like that. But I knew that I began to like reflect on my past. And so many people are like, oh, don't look back on your past. But sometimes when you look back on your past, you find things that prove that you weren't that person on paper. Like in the system, all they have on you is basically the crime that you did. They don't have all the times that you volunteered as a kid or all the times you helped people or all the jobs that you had. They don't have that on your criminal record. All they have is your record, and that's how they judge you. Right? So sometimes you have to look on your past to actually remind yourself that you did this action. Yes, sure. But that doesn't mean that everything else you did didn't matter. That was something that I realized before I went to prison. Then I went into prison like ready. I was like, okay, let's go. But sometimes you do have to give yourself a little bit of tough love because sitting in like a comfort zone isn't constructive to growth either, I don't think. Like if you're not a little bit hard on yourself, I don't know. I think like I don't really like to be coddled either. Like if someone's like, oh no, like everything will be fine. Like sometimes I had to have my dad telling me, be like, Emily, you know what? Smarten the fuck up because I know you can do better. That impacts me as opposed to, well, everything will be fine. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And where's that? So whether it's self-talk or whether it's a loved one, where's the line there between, you don't want to upset someone and make them worse with whatever their issue is. But sometimes I need to tell them, I get my ass kicked a lot trying to build a business with my background. And sometimes I have to sit down and say, you know what, man, that person just said no to me. And you know what? I probably would have said no to me too. Fuck it. I'm going to move on and find something else to do now. As opposed to in the past, I would have said, hey, you know what? This is a great chance for me to go out and get drunk, get high and do whatever I want. And I could justify my behavior. So let's go do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, where's the differentiation between, saying I'm going to be hard on myself, but I'm also not going to identify as a victim and I'm going to be respectful of the fact that I have good in me too.
It just takes time for me. Like it took me a while to come out of the denial phase. Like it took me about a year to come out of the denial phase. And so you can't expect it to kind of happen instantly. Like nothing good is ever instant, right? Except for maybe instant noodles. But you have to go through the phases of being in denial and then being like hard on yourself. For me, there wasn't really like a magic amount of, there wasn't really a balance though. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's hard to describe. You have to get advice from people that actually know you and not people that just know you within the past year. So I think if you surround yourself with people that can actually give you their honest opinion, and it has to be based on facts, not speculation, right? So I think that's the difference.
So you're in prison, you've got this idea for this business, and you're writing these letters, you're reaching out to people to get some coverage and to get some allies. What was the first major breakthrough? When you were in prison, you weren't out yet, and you realized I might actually be able to pull this off. What was that moment?
I'd actually written to one of the former dragons from Dragon's Den, so like the Canadian version of Shark Tank, and I'd read his book in prison, and I wrote an article on it, and then it was basically, his book was called The Wealthy Barber, and I wrote this article called The Wealthy Inmate and how I like manage my finances in prison, and I sent it off to his office, and then I also talked about this little popcorn idea. And then his secretary was like, Dave wants to meet you, literally right away. And I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. And so again, getting those alliances pretty quickly was awesome. And then there's another one. There's another woman that she's a big tech lady, and she had actually taught classes in the prison on entrepreneurship. And so I wrote her a couple letters too. And so just making friends and people that would support me when I got out. It was really cool to get a letter from like a CEO of a big company, because it takes time to write an actual letter. It's not an email. Like you got to write it or type it, print it out, sign it, mail it, right? So it's when you see someone that actually put time into doing these things and writing you back, it shows something.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so you got this positive response from people that you thought may have never spoken to you or communicated with you. So you're approaching time to get out. So while you're in prison, were you able to sell it externally, like sell popcorn outside of prison, or did you have to wait till you were out to be able to sell it to people who weren't in prison with you?
Yeah, like I wasn't allowed to sell it externally. I actually convinced the warden of the prison to let me out for a day to partake in this women's march. So in our prison system, we have these like little daily release things, activities that you can do, but only if you get special permission and only if you have kind of good behavior within the prison. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was participate in this women's march, which was all about women's empowerment. And then my internal parole officer of the prison was like, why don't you see if you can get out and promote your popcorn? But like, you can't sell it because you're not allowed to handle currency as an inmate. And so it took 6 months of doing this paperwork for like a 3-hour event. Because, prison paperwork is just, it's just a whole lot of bullshit. But anyway, so I got let out of the prison still as an inmate to promote the product. And so I had like my business partner make up postcards. He met me there that day, and yeah, just gave it out. It was awesome.
That is awesome. And so when you got out, what were the first steps when you got out of prison to take this idea that you had in prison, the progress that you had made with PR and building some relationships, and start turning that into production of a product and monetization of that product?
Sure. So when I got out on day parole, they like you to have kind of a legit job. Like they don't really support 100% entrepreneurs straight out the gate because it's risky, right? And I knew it was risky too. So I wanted to find a way to build a new network of friends while still making my parole officer happy with like a regular job. So I got a job at the gym. And so I was like, this is like the perfect scenario for someone that wants a fresh start, people that want to eat healthier food, and someone that's going to make my parole officer happy. So I honestly went into the gym and I had my prison resume. I made a resume with all my prison jobs on it. And I was like, hey, I just got out. I'm looking for like a healthy environment to work in, and this is my story. And I got hired because I like handed in a prison resume.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I worked there for about 6 months. And through that time, like I worked there part-time. And then the other time I was just recipe testing. I was sponsoring very small events like in my city. Like, so I'd make like 30 or 50 small bags of popcorn and be able to talk about it at these small events for free. Right. And then I think I sold my first bag about 2 months after I got out, like after I got like all the packaging under control, after I got my health and safety stuff. Because I was like, okay, I've already been on the wrong side of the law. I don't want to be on the wrong side of the law again. So I wanted to make sure like I had all the health and safety checks, right? Like you have to pack it in a facility or make it in a facility that passes all the health tests, and you have to have certain kinds of like sealing and everything like that. So
how'd you go secure all of that? How'd you go get manufacturing capacity and buy raw materials? I mean, how did you pull all of that together coming out of prison with limited resources?
Because I had a former business before I went to prison in social media. I had like a lot of connections in a lot of cities. And so I just asked people, I was like, hey, when you started your food business, where did you start? And a lot of people referred me to a place called the Kitchen Collective. And it was a shared kitchen where you pay hourly. So instead of having to rent out a full space under like a huge overhead, you can just book time in this kitchen. And so we started there. And then 6 months after that, there was a grocery store that had heard about us and really wanted to carry our product. And they even offered us to be able to make it there, like for free. So that's kind of where we make it now. And I actually help them with their social media. It's kind of like a trading system, but they've been super helpful.
And so where is the business today? So you've been out for about 1.5 years, and what have you been able to do with the business? I mean, how much are you making and selling? And is this something you see scaling into a more of a broader product line, or like kind of what's the business plan at this point?
Yeah, 100%. So we have a co-packer lined up now. We have two actually. So in order to scale, you want to give it to a co-packer, like give your recipes who can take charge of packing and distribution and all that. And we're just upgrading our branding for like the retail shelf, because right now it's at the craft level, and we still ship kind of into the US and Canada, but obviously it's not feasible just to be like shipping out this popcorn. Like you want to be able to tell someone, go to the store and you can be able to get it there. So yeah, we're in a couple stores in my city now, but until we get the second level done through the co-packer, which is like, it has like a way longer shelf life. It has, very rigorous health and safety tests. So like they can't be like, oh, I found this nail or something in my popcorn. So have very, very rigorous testing. Not that like hopefully no one will do that, but when you're dealing with the mass market, you never know, right?
And you never know when someone might make a claim, and you have to be able to show, well, it's not possible because I adhere to these standards.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and then pretty soon we're going to be, looking into the US and looking for retailers in the US to carry it.
So you're in a couple stores, you've got this co-packing relationship that you're building, and that's going to lead to mass scalability, at least the opportunity for it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're growing. Are you hiring folks?
Yeah. Like we had a big summer planned, obviously, but with events, because events are like a huge revenue generator for us. But since we don't have that right now, we've really been focusing on the retail level. And actually a lot of people are ordering popcorn now because people are home a lot and they're
sitting at home, Netflix and chilling, and they need popcorn. I mean, it makes sense.
So we've actually seen a growth in sales, and also because it really resonates. It goes back to like how and why the brand was built, right? Like it was made to bring joy and strength during a time of uncertainty and fear and, kind of worry. And so that's kind of what we're in now. It's like we all need to make our own comeback. And I'm really excited like to actually have our first bag that's going to be made from the co-packer. Like I'm so excited for what it's actually going to represent.
Wow, that's awesome. And have you hired some people that you were in prison with?
Yes, I hired one. She's working with us now. And then another, she didn't come to prison with me, but yeah, I get people asking to work with me all the time. So I try to like hire people in as much as I can, even if it's just for like events and stuff. Right. So.
Oh, that's great. That's really awesome. And so how broad is your product line now, and where do you think you'll go with it? What kind of products do you think you'll add? Because it sounds to me like you're building a brand and you're building distribution. And once you have your brand and once you have distribution, you could sell anything, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of kale chips. We're definitely going to sell the seasonings for sure. So people can kind of like make it yourself.
Oh, that's cool. Or you're making like an experience out of it. So someone buys the kernels and they buy the seasoning and you give them the instructions, and you're creating something more than just a bag of popcorn. You're creating an experience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. And so kale chips, popcorn, do you have, a vision to expand even further? Like how far do you think you could push it?
I really want to get good at the popcorn. I want to make the popcorn known first, and then as well as with my story. Like I have a speaking business as well. So, prior to COVID, I was like doing so much of that. But I don't want to like spread myself too thin, right? So I feel like if we can be known for popcorn first and then expand later, like whether it's like through merch or even partnering with like employment agencies and stuff like that, like I think that's another good way to go. Just kind of like building other entrepreneurs that have maybe challenging past or have overcome tremendous adversity, I think would be a good way to go as well.
How can people help? If somebody hears your story today and they want to help, they want to get involved, where do you need the most help and how do people get in touch?
It would be good to have like user generated content. Like I love it when people send me pictures, or if people send me stories, if people have their stories of adversity that they want to share, or they have quotes that they want to share, like I can turn those quotes into graphics. So they can honestly, any way that or if they like to draw and they want to make a sketch about something, or if they, want to do a cartoon, or if they like making graphics or photography, honestly, anything. I like to if anyone wants to get involved in the brand, I'm like, okay, like, what do you like to do? And then they kind of tell me how they like to be creative. And I think just being allowed to be creative is a great thing. So they can just email me at emily@comebacksnacks.com or on Instagram.
And I will link in the show notes. I'll link your email. I'll link your Instagram. And when we share this on social, we'll obviously drive traffic that way. What about investors? Do you have the capital you need, or are you trying to raise money to help scale, or how do you think about that?
Yeah. So we went on Dragon's Den, and they called us. They called us to go on the show. We're like, okay, like we don't know if we're ready yet. We go on the show. My coach is like, okay, like who was a former dragon? Was like, okay, talk about like the story and the drug smuggling. And we did, and we got 4 offers on the air. And then they like just like ghosted us. And then they didn't even air the episode because of like the crime or whatever.
Talk about stigma. Jesus.
Yeah, I know. So I was like, so yeah, we're definitely still open for like offers of investment. We've raised a lot ourselves for sure, just because of like the low, it's been very low overhead, which is great. And like the ability of me to like produce and create PR, like I've got a knack for it.
You've built a great social following. So, I mean, I imagine that you can leverage that quite a bit, right?
Yeah. But when we go into the US, like for sure, like we would like definitely need some help there for sure.
Another question that brings up for me, actually, I wanted to ask you about this anyway, is just the stigma associated with drug use, the stigma associated with going to prison. I'm sure you face an uphill battle as a female entrepreneur. I know, a lot of women do. How do you deal with that? I mean, how do you think about stigma, and how do you overcome it? And what can we be doing to reduce stigma and get this conversation elevated so that it's okay to talk about things like drugs and addiction and going to prison and second chances? I mean, what do we have to do to normalize that conversation?
I think if you have stigma, it's counterproductive to whatever you're trying to do. Like if you're an employer and you're like, oh, we don't want to hire you because of like your past, that sucks for you as an employer, because if you're going to punish someone for being honest and open and trying to turn their life around, that just doesn't make sense. To like, if you want to have a workforce where people are comfortable about where they work, if they can relate to others and be honest, like that's where you get loyalty. That's where you get feelings of belonging. And that's when you really get productivity. But if you're going to punish someone and deny them, and then you're going to hire someone with a resume that, might not be 100% true, or they might be like looking for 4 other jobs at the same time, who's really not going to appreciate the job, that's actually, you're going to pay for that more than if you ever hired someone with, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think a lot of people who can get jobs because they, maybe they have a degree or whatever, they are quick to search for another one at like the blink of an eye. Whereas you get someone that has been through adversity, that has finally get someone who gives them the chance, like they really want to stick around. Like my employees are amazing. And I'm like, you can talk about your past. You can talk about if you're struggling with something. And because they feel safe working with me, like they want to stay there. And that really builds like a solid workforce, and it benefits both people equally. It doesn't just benefit the business, it benefits the person working there, because they feel like they're actually accepted for who they are.
How have you personally experienced stigma? Both, how have you stigmatized yourself? Because I know we do that. And then how have you experienced it from the outside? I mean, how have you been stigmatized against, if that's even like a word?
I think in terms of the brand, parent council, like if we try to get like the popcorn into like schools and trying to teach the kids about, forgiveness after making mistakes. And the parents were like, oh, like because she went to prison, like, they want to be like helicopter parents, and, don't ever let our kids around someone who's made a mistake. Right. So it's like, okay. What else? Obviously, like with the drug use, I kind of just own that. I don't really feel stigmatized, because like we're all on drugs, whether we like it or not, whether it's a drug of like social media or technology, they're all drugs in one way or the next. So
it's like the Weezer song, "We're all on drugs."
Yeah, literally.
That song's meaning has changed for me over the years.
Yeah, like social media can cause people to go just as crazy as cocaine can.
Well, it's eliciting the same dopamine reaction in the brain.
Yeah, exactly. And I know in the future, being able to travel is going to be like a pain in the ass. So there for sure. And just the fact that people don't think I could ever drink again, like responsibly. It's like that trust. They like think you're always going to be an addict for the rest of your life. And I don't really think that's true for everyone.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I'm 20 months into sobriety, and I don't intend to drink or use again. But, like I tell people, like, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to work my program. I'm going to stay sober, stay clean. But I don't like to make promises. I've had people pass on doing business with me because they look at me and they say, how do I know you're not going to relapse? And they want me to, they're looking at me wanting me to tell them some bullshit story that they can believe. I always tell them, I'm like, there's no guarantee. Most of the time when I say that to people, they end up passing. They don't work with me, and that's fine. But some people do, and it's great when they do. I think stigma is tough. I think people don't understand it. I think people don't set out to stigmatize addicts. They don't think they set out to stigmatize people that have been to prison, but I think they don't understand it. And therefore because they don't understand it, they don't know how to react. And so I think this conversation educates people. I mean, if a few more people hear your story and go, you know what? Somebody who went to prison and used to do drugs and can be a successful entrepreneur and be somebody that I would work with or work for or buy their product, or they could be a good example to other people. Look, every single person whose mind we change, we've accomplished our mission.
Mm-hmm. And like, I also talk about like how easy it is to just break the law. Like when people are like, oh, like she was in jail. And it's like, yeah, but you've probably broken the law like 50 times before. Or then I like be like, oh, if it was your son or like your daughter in prison, you'd have a very different perspective. And that's because it's way easier to forgive someone that you know because you've known them for so long. Whereas when you just see this person that's broken the law, that's all you see.
Did you run into any issues with people that knew you before? I've actually experienced this phenomenon where people who knew me before have been the last people that have come around. People that I meet after I got in trouble and went through what I went through, they accept me a lot faster. People that I knew before, I mean, a lot of them still ignore me or trash me on social media regularly, or they troll me. And it's like, okay, I mean, I guess that would have worked back when I was in my addictions, but now it's like, why are you wasting your time? But I don't know why I struggle the most with winning over people from my past. I can win over new relationships a lot faster, actually.
I think it actually benefited me. Like, I know there were people that were unsure of how to react until I got like, all these like influential people on my side, right? Like the mayor of Toronto, like Dragonston, people have like senators from. So now that I have all these like alliances, that then it's like, you're like, okay, but definitely helped
I get
right off the bat when I moved back to my hometown because people knew me from high school and they knew that I was like a nice person. Like, sure, I like to party, but I never did anything crazy, right? So it was just like, okay. And if you just tell your story in ways that everyone can relate to, like, being sad or being in a relationship, and everyone's done dumb shit in relationships. Like, I don't care who you are, you've done dumb shit. Like most people have levels of batshit crazy that they that they hide. So if you just can relate it on those levels as opposed to like going to jail, that's when people kind of are like, oh my God, that actually couldn't have been me. And then you also don't tell it in a way that's like defensive.
That's a really good point. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was about speaking, and I think that this kind of ties into that. So what kind of speaking are you doing? I mean, who are you speaking to? What are the topics you like to talk about? How do you get these speaking engagements?
I just started doing them for free when I came out of prison. I actually started practicing them in prison. Like I would participate in little groups where I had to make presentations. And then I just started doing them for free for schools.
So you're going to schools and you're talking about what you're talking about, your experience going to prison and getting out, or what?
Yeah, like how to recover from mistakes. It depends on the grade level. Like obviously if I teach someone who's like in elementary school, it's more about like forgiveness and peer pressure and, obviously not being ignorant towards the law because, what you don't know can actually hurt you. And then in high school, it's more like, okay, like if you do drugs, like so many people are like, oh, don't ever do drugs, but you're never going to find out who you are if you don't ever take a risk and do something a little bit different. I think like sometimes you have to like really mess yourself up and be able to fix yourself again to find out how strong you actually are.
That's what the AA book says. I mean, that's what I've learned in recovery is that I'm better off because of what I had to go through. I mean, it sucked. It was hard to deal with. It's consequences, right? But I mean, I'm way better off today. I'm grateful for what I had to go through.
And it's not like a cautionary tale. I call it a cautionary fail.
Oh, I like that. That.
Yeah. And then I speak to like women's groups, entrepreneur groups. I've spoken to employers, actually. I speak a lot to employers about hiring people that have been through the system and why they actually make better employees than their C-suite.
Awesome. How was that received?
Really good. I actually won an award for it like a month ago.
What award?
It was called Woman of Distinction. So there's like 10 other nominees for my whole city, and I won it.
That's incredible. Well, congrats.
Yeah. And so what I said in the speech, I was like, this isn't about me accepting the award. This is about the community accepting what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And that's why it was so important.
It's like the community is destigmatizing you and what you've been through and making it okay to have a second chance, or making second chances okay in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I really enjoyed this. Like, what am I missing? What did I forget to ask that we should have talked about?
Honestly, I just love rolling with it.
What's the best way for people to find you? Is it a website? Is it Instagram, email?
Yeah, definitely on Instagram is good, or LinkedIn. Instagram is at @emsobrien. If you want popcorn, it's at Comeback Snacks. I'm always looking for people to input like content suggestion ideas, or if there's things people want to do or create and share. I'm all for it because I love learning different things from people and the struggles they've overcome. So yeah, super friendly, obviously.
Well, awesome. This has been great. I'm really grateful that you came on the show to talk about second chances and talk about, getting well and stigma and everything you're doing. And I hope that our listeners will be supportive and order some popcorn or find a way to get involved with some user-generated content. And I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Another special thank you, Emily, for being here. Congrats on your sobriety milestone and your business and the example you're setting and what you're doing for people who need second chances. Special thank you to our listeners too. We're really grateful for you to be here. If you like the content, please hook us up with a subscribe or a like or a review on your podcast platform of choice and share us with a friend on social media. You can find us on Twitter at StigmaCast. You can find us on Instagram at Stigma Podcast. You can email us, info@stigmapodcast.com, or find us on our website, stigmapodcast.com. If you heard this episode and you're an entrepreneur or you want to be, and this inspired you to build something, go do it. Tell us if you need help. Join the mental health startup community that we've created on Slack and on our website and other places. Get involved. Do something to help other people. You can do it. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thank you for your support.